Good afternoon, and glad to see you're all still awake after lunch. That's good for the afternoon session. So this afternoon I'm going to be talking about some of the practicalities of how you address these two things which Horizon 2020 has introduced, impact and innovation. Now, there's some good news and some bad news. The bad news is that I'm speaking all afternoon. Right, so the good news is that because we're running a little bit late, I'm going to shorten it a little bit, so you won't have to, we're about 45 minutes delayed. The bad news is that we're only going to have one coffee break. Okay, so hopefully we'll be able to catch up in good time for you to go around the motorsports lab and the robotics lab, and for those who don't go, to start on the beers. Okay, so impact and innovation. Now, before I start, like Tim Cook, I'll just give you a bit of, tell you a bit about my background and prejudices. So I currently run a consultancy company, one of those little blobs on his diagram. But I have a technical and commercial background. What I mean by that is that I'm not a lawyer or a patent attorney. I'm not particularly interested in how to secure the rights, but I am interested in how I get value out of the intellectual property. So I've been in this business of commercializing research results for over 30 years now, and it started in 1978 when I was a researcher. And you remember Tim mentioned the man from the NRDC turning up from London in his suit. Well, that same man came to visit me when I was a researcher, and fortunately for me, he gave me the money. Right. So that was there. I then went on and I worked in industry in the early days of the microcomputer industry, where I was responsible for licensing in many new technologies. So it was, if you like, the other side of the fence. And there was a lot of new stuff coming out in the 80s in microcomputers. Then I joined, again, NRDC rears its head again. NRDC turned into British Technology Group. And after the government gave universities the right to own their intellectual property, and BTG lost it, BTG became an international organisation managing research results from around the world, not just from the UK. So I worked there in the 90s, and that was all about development, commercialisation, investment, spin-out companies, trying to take research results to the market. And then since 2000, I've been acting as a consultant in this area. Now, in parallel to that, for over 20 years, I've been acting as an expert with the European Commission, an expert evaluator and proposal reviewer in the areas of innovation and IPR, but also my technical area, which is ICT. And in addition to that, I'm involved with the international standards bodies and the European standards in the area of innovation management. And I'm a member of the LES. So for me, Horizon, with its increased emphasis on commercialization, brings all my interests together. And I'm really quite glad to see the high priority that's been given to it now. Okay, so 4 years ago, the then commissioner, we got some Irish gentlemen here. How do you pronounce that? Okay. Maria Holden Quinn, right. So she announced when she was Commissioner for Research and Science and Innovation, Europe's determination to link science and research to innovation and market. That was one of the driving forces which led, in just at the end of last year, to the launch of Horizon 2020. And Horizon 2020 is very much positioned as an impact-oriented approach aimed at trying to deliver strategic technologies that can drive competitiveness and growth in Europe. And the point about this now for proposals and projects is that you have to address impact and innovation must be managed and addressed in all stages of the project and the proposal, not just in the impact section. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about, this is just a quick overview. I'll talk a little bit about the excellence and impact sections of the proposal, and then later on I'll talk about implementation. That's how you actually run it in practice. You can delete the short break because you're being punished for staying too long over lunch. And then I'm going to have a little bit of a digression into telling you a bit about how you can use patent information to get strategic intelligence, not just IP intelligence, but intelligence about researchers, the market, competitions, and so on. And then I'll talk about managing innovation in the projects. So this is a mix of what the sort of things you should put into a project proposal, but also some of the issues that you need to address when you're actually running the project. Okay, before we start though, I'd like to just go through a few definitions which always seem to cause confusion, particularly in the proposals, and are often misused. It's words like intellectual property rights, innovation, impact. What do we mean by that? And then exploitation and dissemination. Now, you mentioned a little bit about this earlier, so I won't take too much time. But I like to differentiate between intellectual property and intellectual property rights. There are some lawyers who use the two the same, but when I talk about intellectual property, I mean the creation, the intellectual creation. Okay, it's a product of the mind, a product of your research or experimentation. It's the property the idea or the creation. And like a physical property, this intellectual property can have value. It could be a valuable asset. And like a physical property, you can trade it. You can give it away, you can sell it, you can license it, you can use it to do all sorts of other deals. So that's the property. Now, in addition to that, we're very lucky that the law provides legal rights to help you protect that property, or rather to prevent other people using your property. Okay? And I don't just mean legal rights, they're not just patents. Patents protect technical inventions, but there are many other forms of legal right, some which you have to register, some come into existence automatically. Most of them come into existence automatically. But these are legal rights. For example, copyright for software, written works, but also engineering drawings and semiconductor topologies. You have design rights, database rights, and as new technologies appear, you'll find new legal rights appearing. So a couple of key points about this is that you don't have to use intellectual property rights if you don't want to, but there are legal rights there which you could use if you can make a business case. But these are also national rights and time-limited rights. They basically give you the right to have a monopoly around your invention. And they're national rights. People often talk about worldwide patents. Well, there's no such thing. These are national rights, although there are some international agreements. And the basic deal is, and intellectual property rights go back hundreds of years. It was recognized by states that in order to have innovation, you need to encourage new ideas and to avoid the inventors being secretive about it because people might steal it. So the basic deal is that the state is going to grant you a limited monopoly for your legal rights, in return, generally, for you publishing that invention and making it available so that others can then build on that and innovate. So the creator prevents unauthorized use, unless, of course, they come to some agreement, which you can always come to some agreement with someone. And the state benefits by avoiding secrecy and thereby stimulating innovation. That's the whole premise behind the giving of this monopoly. So, just a quick word, why is everyone talking about IP rights today? They've been around for hundreds of years. Horizon has suddenly made a big thing of it. In Framework 7, people are also beginning to make a big thing about it. Well, if you look back as to how the economies have developed, pre-19th century, most economies were driven by land-based wealth. It's the people who owned the land who were the kings, and wars were fought to acquire land. Then we moved to an industrial era where the primary economic commodities were physical: iron, steel, coal. And again, wars were fought. Countries were invaded in order to acquire these economic commodities. And then as we go now into the 21st century, we see that intellectual property is become the key economic asset. So, and building this sort of knowledge-based economy has now become a key objective of governments worldwide, including the European Union. And intellectual property is a core component in this knowledge-based society. So what that means in practice is that today, because of all our communications, I can source my raw materials from anywhere in the world, wherever it's cheapest to do so. I can buy from China or Korea, wherever the raw materials are. I can ship them to wherever it's cheapest for me to manufacture it and build my products. I can advertise and sell over the internet. I can collect money over the internet, and I can ship my products anywhere in the world. So it's not the owner of the raw materials or the owner of the workforce, but it's the owner of the intellectual property. And intellectual property has now become the key asset. And even in the Chinese government a few years ago announced its intention to move away from made in China to created in China. They say nothing about copied in China, but this is the general sort of direction people are wanting. So it's a very competitive environment now. And in fact, most products today, if you think about it, are made up of a bundle of intellectual property. So this example here of the Viennetta ice cream, which is a common one, so if you want ice cream, you can just go and buy a tub of ice cream. But you're buying a bit more here. This wavy ice cream is covered by maybe patent claims in the process for manufacturing, the manufacturing apparatus. There are design rights, functional rights, eye appeal designs, trademarks, know-how, copyright. It's basically a bundle of IP. And that's what's adding its value. If it was just plain chocolate or plain ice cream, it wouldn't cost as much. So just moving on to the next definition, which is innovation. Again, innovation isn't invention. Lots of people talk about developing this innovation when they mean developing an invention. But innovation is really about the successful exploitation of some new idea in order to deliver a benefit to someone. So without the benefit, the tangible benefit, without that benefit, there is no innovation. There are lots of inventions which are not used or don't do very much. So invention isn't innovation. The wheel on its own, for example, doesn't do very much. It's only when it's applied and used in something. And you can think of impact as being the extent of that benefit. Okay, so, and the evaluation criterion Horizon talks about the extent to which the outputs of the project contribute. So think of impact as being the extent of the benefit. And then finally, we've mentioned this before, exploitation. It can be commercial exploitation or research exploitation. Exploitation is probably not a good word because it implies exploiting something and maybe commercializing something, but exploitation is use of the results. And that use could be for doing additional research. This picture here of Isaac Newton, which I use because it's out of copyright now, he was quoted in as saying, I think when he was asked, why are you so brilliant? Why have you done so much? He said, well, if I've seen a little bit further, it's by standing on the shoulders of giants. And that's really what, think of exploitation as being, a stepping stone, because not everything is close enough to market in order to become commercial. Okay, so we'll skip over that now. Let me move on quickly to how we address some of these things in Horizon proposals. So, as we said, it's impact-oriented, and you have to address it in all three sections. And the same to apply. I'm talking mainly here about research and innovation actions and innovation actions, and maybe the SME instruments, and there are a number of other types of instruments for funding. But in general, whatever the project, and it doesn't even need to be Horizon projects, there's a common theme that all the evaluators are looking for. We're looking to see that you demonstrate an understanding of the technology, and in the case of near-market things, the market environment. So your state-of-the-art. You've got to show that you know what you're talking about. And you have to use that in order to justify the objectives that you're proposing, project objectives, and then present a credible and viable plan, methodology and plan to achieve those project objectives. Okay? And then you have to, so these first three, tend to be in the excellence section of the proposal, where you're talking about the state of the art, the technology areas, and you need something. And then this bit here is more about the implementation to demonstrate that you have the ability and the capability to deliver what it is that you're proposing. I'd say innovation SME actions maybe focus a little bit more on some of the near market things, but research and innovation actions also need to address some of these. So concepts for commercialization, analysing competitive solutions, for example, and understanding where you are. So how do you do this? And this is, we haven't got time to go into a lot of detail, but let me just give you an overview of the sort of things that might help you. So I think of it a bit like trying to understand the landscape. What you're trying to do in those early stages is pull together all the information that you have about your technology area. So we're talking about state-of-the-art, market factors, technology, research competitors, as well as industrial competitors, related research. You gather your area. The objectives and the topics are given to you by the work programme and the call challenges of the call. Horizon is not so prescriptive as Framework 7. So with Horizon 2020, you're given the sort of key challenges, but you're left to choose the route through, how you want to get there. So you have to understand all this and get this information together. And you also have to now think about the potential benefit, which is the innovation. And one of the key messages I want to give you is that innovation or delivering a benefit is about satisfying someone's needs and wants. It's not about technology, it's about satisfying someone's need and want so you can deliver a benefit to them. So you need to try and select the project objectives to maximize the impact. So what you do is you gather the information, you analyze it to give yourself some strategic intelligence, and then you plan the route to get there. And just quickly go through some of these things. So the data that you need to gather. When you're looking at state of the art, of course, your researchers will be used to doing this for their existing proposals. So you look at academic papers and various other material, but you can also look at patents and other IP. Patents are often overlooked, and I'll talk about that later. Again, when you then want to look at the market, you can look at market reports, talk to your industry partners, look at industry reports, and you can get a picture of what the market's doing. But don't forget patents and other registered IP. Again, we'll talk about it later. Again, looking at competitor intelligence. Again, you need to understand what your competitors are doing. Again, your industry partners might help with that. And of course, you'd look at the usual market reports, and then it's quite valuable looking at company websites, going along to an exhibition and talking to the secretary on the stand, who'll probably reveal more than she should do about the plans. And again, patents. And then you need to understand other technologies. Technologies being different ways to achieve the same thing. So an often quoted example is that of the huge amount of research that the Americans spent during the space race in order to come up with a writing implement that would operate in a vacuum. So they could write notes when they're floating upside down. Spent a fortune, and we did end up with a biro type device, but the Russians used a pencil. So, you have to think whether there are better ways of doing it. Okay, and then a couple of other things now. You're asked, and these are things that you're asked to include in the proposal. You're told to ask about potential barriers and obstacles. And what they mean there are they're generally not barriers to doing the research, they're barriers to commercialization. So we're talking about freedom to use issues, any standards related things, any regulations, and standards you're supposed to talk about. So standards it's often not addressed. People don't know how to address it in proposals. But standards are seen now as a core part of the innovation ecosystem. The Commission places a lot of emphasis on it, and if you can identify that you've looked at the standards environment, that maybe your research outputs can be used as the basis of a standard or a new standard or contribute, then that's all very valuable. Fortunately, you can just go to these links here for the international standards, ISO or CEN or CENELEC, and you can do a search, a bit like a Google search. So you can put in your technology areas, and it will give you a list of all the standards related to that. Doesn't take long to do, but it's quite useful to do to at least see what's there already. And if it's relevant, mention it. Because it's so important, and because standards are now seen as one of the measures that will support innovation, the European Standards Organisation, CEN and CENELEC, have actually produced a booklet. We'd hope to have some here today, but you can download it from one of the links I give there. There's a little booklet on how to address standards in Horizon 2020. There's a guide, but you could also go on the website and they give you a telephone number for you to contact someone. So very quickly, that was just more of a checklist of things to look for when you're pulling your proposal together. But then you have to sort of try and pull it all together for the proposal. And you use it really, that information, to select your objectives and then to plan your route through this potential minefield. And there are three things you need to think about. It's the plan for your research and development strategy, and it's the plan for your exploitation, that's use or commercial exploitation, and you have to think about how you're going to disseminate the information. They're the three major plans that are being looked for. And how you do that really depends on where you are on this technology readiness level roadmap. There are 9 different levels, and they're in the annex on the participants portal. But you're probably talking about for basic research is down here, market ready is up here. And depending on, if you're doing a research and innovation action, you're probably around here somewhere. If you're doing an innovation action, you're maybe a bit further up, and an SME action, you're a little bit further up here. So, and of course, the invention value increases the further down this road you go. If I have an early stage drug, it's fairly risky, and the chances of it coming to market might be quite low. But if I spend a lot of money and I take it through 3 stages of clinical trials, I've got something which is pretty near market ready. And so the price of a charge, if I had that money to invest, would go up. So that's just for reference. So if we look at the main proposal sections, the first 2 sections, the impact and innovation sections, they're really, as I said earlier, based on demonstrating that you understand the technology and the market. It's the state of the art. You have a template that tells you what to put in there. But it's all about demonstrating that you understand the environment so that you can justify the objectives that you're setting yourself. And then you have to present a viable, and it has to be a credible, viable methodology and plan in order to achieve those project objectives and so deliver innovation to market. And the important thing now is that the excellence and the impact sections must be consistent with each other. In the past, in Framework 7, they weren't so linked, and you would often get impact statements that said they're going to create world peace, some huge impact, which didn't really reflect the content of the excellence section. Now these 2 are being looked at together, and they're being scored together. So make sure they're consistent. And then the implementation section, as I said, is more about demonstrating how you're going to deliver and your capability to deliver. So CVs, infrastructure, capacities, and so on, governance, policy, system structures. And I'll say more about that after coffee. So if we just look at the individual sections. And I've pulled out some things from the proposal template relating to impact and innovation. This is in the excellent section proposal template. And I should say these templates are pretty generic across research and innovation actions. And sometimes not everything applies to the action. So, try and answer it if you can, but you may not be able to. So, for example, the proposal template for the excellent section asks you to, well, of course it says here, it's got to be consistent. It asks you to describe the positioning of the project. Where is it positioned in this landscape? It asks you to talk about the innovation activities that are going to be linked with the project. It asks you, of course, to talk about the progress beyond the state of the art. And you'd be surprised how many people either don't address the state of the art or they don't address the progress. They'll say, we're going to do this without saying where they're coming from. And vice versa, they talk about the state of the art and then they don't say anything about how they're going to progress. They just dive straight into the objectives. Then you're asked to describe the innovation potential. Hardly anyone knows what that is. It's a real problem. And then you're asked to refer to the results of a patent search. And again, very few people present that. And these are all little things which cause you to lose points, okay, when you're being scored. But then we look at the evaluation criteria. So this is the criteria that the evaluators use to judge your proposal. And you'll notice not everything here is covered. The main question here is the extent to which the proposed work is ambitious, has innovation potential, and is beyond the state of the art. So, as Tim was saying this morning, know what your customer is looking for, and perhaps you use their words. Because although you should address the issues that are mentioned in the proposal template, make sure you do that. Pay special attention to trying to answer these questions. Okay? Very often the ambition is not so obvious. Innovation potential. What is the potential? Is it just a one product solution? Or are you producing an infrastructure or a basic technique that can be widely used in different sectors? So, try and expand what you're offering so that your end result has innovation potential way beyond what you're doing. Okay, if we move on to the impact section, so the message there really for the excellence section is that you've got to think about impact and innovation and try and address it there. But when we look at the impact section, of course, there's a lot more in there. Again, you're asked to say how your project will contribute to the expected impacts as listed in the call. Many proposals just talk about the impact of their results. And they say, the impact of my results will be fantastic for Europe. They'll have widespread, it'll reduce unemployment, it'll do all sorts of things. And what they fail to do is to read the work plan where it says very clearly, 3 or 4 bullet points, expected impacts, 1, 2, 3. And so make sure they address the expected impacts as listed under that call. Then it talks about improving innovation capacity. Again, this is a bit like innovation potential. Again, if you produce maybe an open access infrastructure for developing something on top of it, then that's if you like, improving the capacity in a particular sector. Maybe for if you do an e-health health records European-wide database, that suddenly provides potential for lots of other innovations, and the capacity to innovate is improved. You're asked to talk about strengthening competitiveness and growth. And this is one that's, again, often misunderstood. The question is really about strengthening competitiveness and growth for SMEs in Europe. So this is very much about, you've done this wonderful, say, e-health open database, and because of this, you're providing a platform for lots of different SMEs to use your results in order to become more competitive and to grow. And again, this thing about needs, the innovations to meet needs, and how you're going to deliver the innovations. And we'll say more about delivering the innovations tomorrow when I talk about the exploitation strategies. And then it asks you to talk about barriers and obstacles. So that's just first page, so a bit more on the innovation template. It also asks you to provide a draft plan for the dissemination and exploitation of project results, or a business plan if appropriate. Again, you have to look at the call. It's not appropriate for research and innovation actions to do a business plan, but for everything you need to have an exploitation strategy and a dissemination plan. What you see very often is that the proposals maybe just list, have a table of how the partners are going to exploit the results. And as I think Jörg said this morning, you have the table and you have University of so-and-so and it's going to do this, this, this. Someone else is going to do this, this, this. But it's a collaborative project. You're producing something which is collaborative. It's what the whole project is about. And people very rarely say anything about what the exploitation strategy should be. And there's no real excuse for that, because you've already told us what you expect to deliver. What you quite often find is they say the exploitation plan will be done in month 6 when we got some results. And it's a work item, it's a deliverable later on in the project. And they say that's not really acceptable now, because you already know, you've already told us in your excellence section what your objectives are, what your expected results are. So assuming you know what they are, you have an idea what might happen, you should be in a very good position to at least outline what your strategy is, whether it's to provide this platform that you're developing as open access and provide added value services on top of that, or whatever. Consortium agreements, we'll again come on to that later. It's you will need a consortium agreement, and people often just say we'll have a consortium agreement based on the DESCA model, which doesn't actually tell you anything about how you're going to address some of the key issues in there, such as ownership and the way you work out, for example, the relative contributions for the inventions and the IPR. So I'll again say more about that later. And the same applies to this, strategy for knowledge management and protection. What you often see is a quotation from the rules, which just says we will follow the rules regarding intellectual property, and the person who develops it will own it, and if it's jointly owned, it will be jointly developed, and we'll do the rest in the consortium agreement. I mean, I'm sure those of you who've seen proposals, that's pretty common. Again, so these are things that you're asked to do. So try and do those, but remember the evaluation criteria, because again, this is what the evaluators will tend to mark against. Although they'll read everything, there are certain things here which are often not done and which are the cause for projects to be marked down. So for example, the expected impacts, make sure it's contribution to the expected impacts listed in the work programme. When you're looking at enhancing innovation capacity, that's very rarely discussed, and it's a great thing for the evaluators to grab on if they want to not sound totally positive. Strengthening competitiveness and growth, again, you have to think about how your results are going to be used in such a way by other people in Europe, SMEs in particular, in order to help them develop new products and services, and therefore become more competitive and grow and stimulate European economy. But this is very much about growth of companies. Any other societal, environmental issues, this really only applies to not necessarily the emerging leadership in key technology section, but to the societal challenges, because now there's no separate call for the what used to be the social sciences and SSH, social sciences and humanities. It's all been integrated, so the technology and the societal challenges are now all together. So if that's the sort of project you're doing, then you have to try and address this. And finally, the proposed measures to exploit and disseminate management of IPR. So you'll see that not everything here is mentioned here. So I would just say that when you're writing it, make sure you cover everything, but put special emphasis on trying to address some of these, because this area here is very frequently used as a means of marking people down, and increasingly in the future, it's not so much now because most people don't address it properly. So, you know, if you marked everyone according to that, nothing will get funded. But as you know, by virtue of these sort of seminars and lots of other work, you'll find over the years, I think the importance of impact and innovation and the quality of proposals will rise. So say more than just quote the rules and we'll do it later. Try and say a bit more about how you're going to manage the IPR. You know, the strategy for managing it, the IP policy of the project, and so on.
Eugene,
yes.
About management of the property rights, would it be a valuable suggestion saying, let's try to charge someone about the IP management, so have an IP manager, or also even to say, okay, creating an IP steering committee within the consortium?
Yes, I'll say a bit more about that in the implementation side, where I'm going to be talking a bit more about structures and processes to deliver this. But in some ways, I think, you know, they asked this question here under the impact section, when in some ways I think it perhaps ought to also be in the management section. But you have to say something a bit more than just, you know, the person who owns it, you know, the person who creates it owns it, and if it's jointly created, then we'll share it. And I'll say more about that later. Sorry.
Do you think that the evaluators, because obviously sometimes the proposers don't fully understand these concepts, do you think the evaluators always do?
Not, no. Yeah, to be frank, I would say they probably don't all know it, but I would say they're better than they were in the past, because at the last evaluation that I was at, there were quite a lot more, for the innovation related, quite a lot more new people come in from the commercial sector. In the past, it's been very biased towards the academic researchers, but I think they've been on LinkedIn and they've looked in all the innovation groups, and there were quite a number of people who were from the investment community, and as Tim said, all these different multilingual people from industry, people from investment community, and there was a lot more awareness of the issues, and I think that'll just increase. I'm going to talk about exploitation strategies tomorrow in more detail, but you have to think really about, there are two bits really, the what and the why. You know, what you're planning to do and why. So you have to have done some sort of a little target analysis of the market and the competitors and the barriers. And then your research results that you say you're going to produce, you know, you have to target those somehow. So your exploitation strategy won't be just, oh, I'm going to sell it to the electronics industry. You have to say, for this particular output, you know, it fits in this slot here, and I'm going to target it at, you know, maybe chip design companies, for example. So, and then, you know, that's the what and the why. And then the how, which is the strategy of getting there. And again, I'll say more about that tomorrow. But it's about sort of understanding the route. You know, how far along that technology readiness level do you want to go? Do you think at the moment you've got something that you can license immediately? Can you make a sufficiently good business case or commercial case to an investor or a licensee? Or do you feel that it's only lab concept, and in order to, you know, get any further, you need to produce something to validate, a pilot plant to validate it at industrial scale? What do you want to do? Or do you want to spend your money and go all the way and produce a spin-out company? So these are the sort of things. What about regulatory hurdles that you will have to overcome? How will you address that? Will you have to do, if it's a diagnostic device, there are certain regulatory issues. Then the commercial vehicle we'll talk about, and then the funding, where you get the money from. And if it's closer to the market or an SME action, then you ought to think about some draft financials. And of course, there are very many different business models. You can sell it. What's missing off the bottom here is give it away. You can do that. If that's what your inventor wants to do, he can give it away. Or you can sell it, or you can license it. And the more you go along this route, it increases your level of involvement.
One question. These requirements, are they applicable to all Horizon 2020 calls? Or are they specific to, for example, those are more geared towards spin-outs and post-research?
No, you mean the templates, proposal templates. And the proposal templates and the evaluation criteria, they try to make them generic, which is part of the problem, because
It's quite a long distance from peer research.
well, you wouldn't expect. I wouldn't expect a university to take a product to market. I expect the research result to go some way down that technology readiness level and get to the point where you would engage an investor if you wanted to go to a spin-out route, or you'd engage a licensee, and that's part of your exploitation strategy. So mostly you'd be in this area here, licensing or spinning out, and those are probably the main business models that you would look for, depending on your exploitation strategy. And I put this diagram here. And what I'm trying to indicate here is there are a number of things you have to do and think about before you can get from an idea to generating revenue. And what I'm trying to point out is that they're all interlinked. The business and market strategy, the exploitation and the IP management strategy depends on a lot of issues, IP issues, technical issues, commercial issues, and where you're going to protect your IP, how you're going to defend it, what sort of business model do you want to do. So there's quite a lot of things to consider when you're going along that route. And just to summarise, this was I'm sorry if it's rushed a bit, but I'm under instructions to catch up. Basically, the message from this first section, which is about trying to pull your proposal together. Some key messages. The first one is that you have to address this issue of impact and innovation in all three sections. It's now not only in the proposal template, but also in the criteria.
I've just been spending the last couple of weeks looking at the Marie Curie Fellowship proposal,
Yes.
so that's quite a different thing.
Yeah.
But what I was struggling there was that because the evaluation criteria is very much marked into the three sections, and a lot of the applicants do exactly what we're saying. They will kind of mix up the kind of the impact into those sort of excellence of the research, and sort of so that they end up talking about both things in a lot of the different sections. How are the evaluators briefed on that? Do they literally look at the, when they're sort of doing tick-the-box evaluation of the proposal, will they consider it as a coherent proposal, or will they be very much looking at section by section?
Well, it depends on the evaluators. Some evaluators will read the whole lot, but the evaluation criteria are fairly open-ended, generic questions. They're not really tick boxes, and some evaluators, or quite a lot, will, because they have so many to read, so little time, you'll read first section, evaluate, excellence, and then you'll try and compare that with the criteria. And I've been in cases where someone's marked it down, and in the consortium meeting, someone says, "Oh, but they discussed that over there," and then they'll say, "Oh, well, they discussed that in the impact section, so they have covered it." So it's as Tim said this morning, it's important to understand the language of your customers. The questions in the evaluation criteria are not always the same as the proposal template. So you have to try when you write your proposal to match the way you present it to what the evaluators are going to look for. So as I said, that means gathering the information to understand the landscape, but not just gathering the data, try and analyse it and get some strategic intelligence out of it, so that when you say, and that's why I'm going to do this, these are my project objectives, you've justified it. And then, of course, you have to sort of present a measurable strategy and plan. But the other key message is just justify it. Those of you who've had, how many of you have had ESRs from projects? Okay, it's not justified is a very common term. Not fully justified, or not satisfactorily addressed, or not, you know. So, you know, try and make sure you've justified everything. Okay, so any questions before I go on?
Yeah, just a point to make on that, what sounded like a really scary thing, is to remember that whenever you're participating, you will be part of the consortium. And if you are a university, you will have industrial partners. And one really good piece of advice I heard not long before Horizon 2020 was launched was get your industrial partners to write the impact section. You know, and in terms of the routes to market, the primary and most effective route to market is via one of your industrial collaborators. Because if they don't want to exploit it, they won't be in the consortium. And so whilst all those things happen, as a university, you don't have to do them all.
Yeah.
And so the real thing is make sure you get good industrial collaborators.
Yeah, that's very, very good advice, because the industrial partners, you know, they don't want to waste their time, and they're not being 100% funded in general. So the only reason they're participating is because they see something in it for them. And so and there's also a question which not sure I had up there, but there is a question about show the contribution of the industrial partners to the exploitation, or words to that effect. So that's one point. And the other point is that when it comes to scoring this, and you know, it's all a very, very open and independent evaluation, and the proposals are scored and ranked, and if there are equal tying scores, then they have a formula. So first of all, they'll look at depending on whether it's an innovation or research action, they'll take first of all the overall score, and then if two are tied, they'll look at the excellence score or the impact score and move them around. And then if they're still tied, what they look at is the amount of money going to SMEs. Right? So if you have SMEs in there, it's a good thing. And it's okay, any other questions?
Just on that point, how could an evaluator say, if you can't think of anything else, innovation equals jobs? And this one would work.
Well, I guess this is strengthening the competitiveness and growth of, I guess that's the question here, isn't it, on strengthening the competitiveness and growth of companies by developing innovations. So,
But is it
Great.
that? Is it that?
I think you have to try, these are the words, you know, so you have to justify why you think you're going to strengthen, you know, competitiveness and growth of companies. That's what the Commission's trying to do for Europe, and I suppose that means jobs. But how, you know, jobs or money. There's another question up there.
I work with IP management at a tech licensing office. For most of these applications with IP section, my experience is that the earliness of technology doesn't enable one to really put the whole lot of analysis towards one direction, because there's a lot of forecast that goes at that stage, that what would be patenting, and the comments on the route that might be taken really depends on what comes out of the project.
Yeah.
You can make a lot of forecasts, and you can talk about about the landscape that exists around it,
Yeah.
white spaces in that area. You certainly can't talk about or make concrete comments on what route would you take,
No,
or if at all.
I think and also remember the whole lot's got to fit into 70 pages, the whole proposal 70 pages, so they're not really expecting a full exploitation plan. I think it would be some sort of strategic statement like, you know, we expect to get this, and, you know, the route is likely to be via spin out, or we're going to form a company, or we're going to, you know, I think it's at a fairly general level. You don't have to go into a lot of detail and IP analysis for things you haven't got. But you should have this strategy in the proposal, but then you will almost certainly within the work plan somewhere have, you know, update of the exploitation plan on a yearly basis or whatever when the results start coming in.
I think from the from the perspective of the technology scope, you can still have more concrete information in there, but as far as filing strategy is concerned, you
No, I
still
don't know
have
about filing. You can't, no, you can just say, I will, when results come out, we'll have a process for assessing the, assessing the results. It's just part, but you have to show that you're doing it, and it's part of what we'll talk about just before the end of the day. Was there any other questions?
Maybe one point was we were talking about the strategic use of IP and innovation in Horizon 2020, which is a significant part also of the evaluation and assessment of the European Commission. And that brings me to the aspect that for some proposals it might be quite important for to describe how you're going to exploit the results for the project, but as in particular for the SMEs, also how this relates to the corporate development of the SME. So you should not see the project isolated to the corporate development of the SME. In order to be very obvious that you are capable to use the results for strategic development, it might be good to relate it. To say, okay, we are going to develop a new sensor technology in that project, which is fine and has new properties and better whatever things which you can use in the future, but you also related that you have also started to develop a new unit in the company which is, let's say, capable to exploit it also in a sustainable way. And that's also sometimes missing, that you limit the exploitation plan to what is to be done in the project and directly after the project, and you miss to relate it to the corporate development of the SME, because sometimes for the evaluators is also a point of question, are they capable to use the results? Is this sustainable? What are you going to do with the results? And this is exactly the finding of the assessment, that many SMEs have been involved, because everybody knows SMEs are important, but only 22 of them have been using the results strategically on a sustainable way for their future corporate development. And if you see a chance to do that and to match it, of course that brings you, let's say, in a very good position, that people trust in your plans and in exploitation.
SMEs, I think there's a bit of focus on SMEs, because SMEs don't get involved in these projects lightly. They're very busy, they don't really have time, so they really are only getting involved because they're hoping to get something out of it, which is maybe not the same as the research department of a very large multinational who are just leveraging their research. So you need to make sure you get some, if you like, strategic marketing endorsement from your SMEs, that they really want to use it, or from your big companies as well.